to be here today, and thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you about kind of the work that Place to Be does. I am going to share my screen, but first of all, I am Jacqueline Cassidy. I am the director for Scotland for Place to Be, although Place to Be is a organisation that's across the whole of the UK. We're in about 500 schools across the whole of the UK. In Scotland, we're in 55 schools. So I'll talk to you about kind of what we do here, but it also is relevant to the rest of the UK. Hoping that you can all see that, and I'll just start at, my slides should have been started at the beginning, so I'll start from there. This is when I need tech support. Slideshow, there we go, start from the beginning. Super. So hopefully you can all see that. Do let me know if there are any problems. So we are a whole school approach to mental health. So it's about early intervention and prevention. But today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about kind of what our experience has been through lockdown, a little bit of kind of how we're responding to that and what we're doing, and a bit of our broader work around the whole system around the child, and some of our work with parents and families. So overall, our mission is absolutely about supporting the mental health of children and young people. And I'm sorry, just going back a second. Sorry about that. And our vision is that basically all children and young people will have the supports that they need in order to be able to thrive in their lives, and to build kind of lifelong coping skills. We don't think that we can solve the systemic issues that cause a lot of the issues for children and young people, but we do want to be able to give them the resilience to be able to cope with them. So kind of what are the key issues and challenges? So you'll probably be familiar with some of these statistics already. Again, this statistics from England. 1 in 8 children and young people have a diagnosed mental health problem. There's some research that's just come out from NHS Digital that says that has risen to 1 in 6. We also know that for many adults with mental health problems, they first experience their symptoms before the age of 14. So we know that a lot of this is happening in childhood and then playing out in adulthood. We also know that the experience for those who live in poverty and disadvantage is likely to be higher. There is likely to be a higher increase in mental health problems. We also know that children and young people find it very difficult to access education when they have mental health problems. So their ability to do as well as they could is hampered by mental health needs. Now, this is all pre-COVID, so we're fully expecting these levels of need to rise. So there was already high levels of need pre-COVID, and we expect that to rise post-COVID. What we did find during the kind of the past year and a half, during kind of the lockdowns, I mean, it won't be a surprise to any of you, but from survey results that we did, the tricky issues, as you can see here, around family relationships, sense of loneliness and isolation, behavioural issues. So that coming from parents, really, a sense of behaviour was really tricky. For some children and young people, violence at home, and for some parents, kind of violence at home, and issues around young people and self-harming. You'll notice this doesn't all add up to 100%, because obviously people were reporting 1 or 2 different issues kind of being raised for them during that period. We did telephone check-ins with our children and young people. So like many organisations, we had to kind of overnight reinvent what we do. All of our work at the moment is face-to-face. We are used to sitting in a room with a child or a young person and working through their challenges and issues with them. And suddenly we had to do everything in a digital way. So there was quite a lot of change. So at first we just did check-ins, and I think for many young people that was just really, really important to just have someone to have a quick chat with on a weekly basis, or an opportunity to just kind of share what was happening for them. As the lockdowns and the restrictions went on, we started delivering our one-to-one service via digital means, either Teams or Zoom. And again, that was well received, but there are challenges in doing that, because lots of children and young people aren't in a safe space in their own homes where they can have these conversations, or there just isn't the infrastructure, so there isn't the devices that they need or the technology that they need, or in many cases there isn't the space. And we certainly know that for a lot of parents that we were talking with and supporting as well through this period, that, you know, it wasn't unusual to be having conversations where they were in the bathroom, because that was the only place that they could find to have some safe space for themselves. Post-lockdown, as we've gone back to education, back to our kind of schools and community environments, we're there's issues around ongoing anxiety. Those issues that kind of emerged during lockdown, kind of increases in poverty, and unsurprisingly kind of bereavement and loss, in a range of ways, I think, which have been really difficult for children and young people. And we're certainly in our secondary schools seeing an increase in kind of self-harm and suicidal ideation, which is where young people have felt incredibly overwhelmed by the current circumstances and have really struggled with that as they've returned to school. So what does Place to do to help children and young people? So I'm going to run this little video. I'm really hoping it will work, but hopefully the children will be more articulate than me.
It's mute.
It's mute. Oh gosh. So I can hear it, but you can't.
No, there is an option when you share screen to share sound as well from your laptop. If I don't know if.
Okay, let's try this. Your screen sharing. Advanced sharing options. Where would I find that, Kata?
I'm not really sure. I just was told, so I haven't ever used this kind of.
Can I help, maybe?
Yes, please. Yes.
Hello. If you go, there is a microphone icon where you can mute, and then there is an arrow, and generally there is an option that, oh no, it's actually on share screen. Where you share a screen, you have the option to share your audio, and it's right on the bottom when you try to share the screen. There is the option of the window or what you're going to share, and on the bottom there is share audio.
So is that the green button? I've got that. I've got already that I'm screen sharing. Should it be there?
I guess so.
Yeah, go on share screen again.
Got it.
Did you get it?
Yeah, I did. Let me see if this. Right, I'm going to put that back to the beginning.
Glad that Place to Be is in our
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Perfect. Wonderful. Right, I will. And is it loud enough or quiet enough? I just maybe share a bit. Perfect. I will let you listen to the video. Thanks so much for the support.
It's a bit quiet.
Let me do. Sorry about this. I'll just need to turn up the volume on my computer, I think. So. Sorry about this. Can't quite get to my actual own audio on my computer. Just going to stop sharing for a moment, just 1 second. I like turn up the volume.
No worries.
It's all a voyage of discovery, this, isn't it? So let me just now, if I share the slideshow. Share sound, brilliant. Like, let's fingers crossed this works this time. So slide. So sorry, this is oh, it was working so well there. Sorry about this. So,
No problem at all.
I'll just go back to current slide. I'll just do from the beginning. And that's something very odd has happened to my. There we go.
I'm glad that Place to Be is in our school because then we can talk and we don't need to feel down.
Place to Be is a children's mental health charity. We put teams of expert counsellors in schools across the UK, so supporting children, parents,
Sorry,
and
it's still
teachers
really
and
quiet.
the school community.
The area we're in is...
Okay, I'm wondering if the video is just more problematic than it needs, because I think it's going to be quite complicated for me to try and sort that out just now. So maybe I'll just skip to the next slide if that's all right.
I could hear it more or less all right. Sheila, could you try to turn your volume off? That maybe would help a bit.
It was subtitled as well, so we can always just read the subtitles.
Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, right, no problem.
The 10th most deprived in the whole of Scotland. This unfortunately leads to difficulties and issues around domestic violence. We have issues with drug and alcohol abuse for parents, so the children are coming in facing a huge amount of challenges.
1 in 10 children, which equates to 3 in every class, will develop a mental health problem.
When you don't address children's mental health problems, they grow up with the child and they become an enormous cost to society, but also an immeasurable cost to the human.
Place to Be is all about building relationships and trust and giving children a safe environment where they can talk. And they can either have 10-minute short appointments during lunch times or break times. If their problems or issues are more serious, they can be referred for one-to-one counselling.
It's good that I've went to Place to Be because it won't affect my future anymore, because it's all in the past now and I talked about it.
Having Place to Be to access for advice and support definitely lessens the stress levels for myself. Less stress for the children, less stress for the classroom, and it just benefits the whole school.
Before my daughter came to Place to Be, she was sad and she was lonely and she didn't feel included. Since she's been going to Place to Be, she comes home telling me about how great her day's been, which before was something that she didn't have the confidence to do.
Place to Be is something that can support all the teachers, all the classes, all the staff in a school. It really supports the community and can make a difference to a community, and I would be lost without it, to be honest.
If we didn't have it, then I wouldn't be as happy as I am now.
So that was a young person talking about kind of their experience of Place to Be, and you'll have heard during that some of the things that were talked about there. Just so Place to Talk is a drop-in session basically, and the child can refer themselves, so they can say, I need to talk to somebody today. I want to come and speak to the Place to Be person. And they can, in primary school they often bring a couple of friends along, so that's perfectly fine. And an opportunity to just kind of normalize talking about your feelings. We also have a range of kind of other kind of more detailed interventions, including kind of one-to-one counselling and group work and other therapeutic interventions. We've got, obviously, as you would expect with a kind of organisation like ours, we've got a number of additional kind of focus areas. So safeguarding is obviously a huge one for us. But we also have a lot of expertise in additional support needs and also in particular kind of hidden harms. We take a holistic approach, so it's about the whole school approach. And we work really closely with teachers, but with all school staff to make sure that they understand kind of the mental health issues that are being raised within their school communities. So when I say the whole school staff, we often find in primary schools that it's the school janitor who actually hears from children the most, who's got the kind of tends to have like the warm, safe, snug office where a child might want to go in and feel safe and share their experiences about things. So we often do a lot of work supporting the janitor to be the person who is that first point of call and to help them deal with that and to deal with any kind of secondary trauma that they might be experiencing as well. Again, a child is part of a whole system, and a school's part of a whole system, and parents, carers and family are the most important part of that. So we work really closely with parents around the needs of the child, and we support parents in the kind of the work. We support parents as part of our work in order to help them with their skills and with their confidence around their parenting. And of course, it's naturally we integrate with all of kind of the other with all of the other systems around the child. So we work quite closely with CAMS and other support pathways for a child. this is just a really quick slide that shows kind of what we want is a child to walk out into a school that supports their mental health needs in all the ways that it could. So we might be doing a targeted support with a child where we'll be doing one-to-one work with them, or they might be part of group work. But when that's finished, we want them to walk out into a school that values their well-being, that values their positive mental health. So we'll do kind of lots of universal pieces where it might be classroom work, or it might be whole school work, where we're helping people understand their feelings, help them express their feelings, and help them deal with kind of the challenges that they face. So this sort of slide looks at that kind of targeted and universal as one. So as part of that systemic approach, what do we do to support school staff? Well, a range of things, and we do know that staff are really struggling. So this is a slightly old survey, and one that we hope will be redone soon. But you can see from that that's a huge number of teachers saying that they don't feel that they're able to really support children and people with their mental health because they've just never been trained in it themselves. Certainly we're finding with the initial teacher education program that they're not well-being and mental health aren't issues that are covered in the curriculum, or if they are, they're very, very brief. But we know that teachers are experiencing a huge amount of stress, and indeed during lockdown they were also experiencing their own additional stresses, huge sense of overwhelm amongst teachers. And we certainly, from our practitioners in school, we're hearing from teachers about their own increasing health needs, incidences of self-harm, incidences of suicidal ideation amongst this group of professionals who have normally been in a position to really hold and support children and young people. So we've been offering Place to Think, which is something we've always done in our partner schools, which is a reflective supervision space where teachers and staff can come together, think about what's happening for a child whose behaviour maybe has caused issues or challenges within a classroom setting, help them through that process of, behaviour is communication. So what's this child communicating, and how do you help and support that child? And as we've been going through kind of the lockdown and the pandemic responses, we've been working with those teachers as well to look at kind of how their own well-being is impacting on their ability to deal with those challenges. So we've done a lot of work like that. And so a big piece of this work was supported by Scottish Government, and we worked with about 500 teachers across Scotland using digital tools to support them. And with these small group supervision sessions, and we had teachers who were up in Shetland talking to teachers who were down in Dumfries, which is a pretty big geographical distance, but a lot of shared issues, particularly in those kind of rural and remote locations where the support's pretty thin on the ground. We also during lockdown provided open access to our Mental Health Champions Foundation programme, and 5,000 teachers in Scotland participated in that. About 50,000 teachers across the whole of the UK participated in that. And that was an online mental health programme with a clinician supporting people through the programme, but able to access in your own time when you needed to and when you wanted to. And as I say, we were on the Place to Think sessions as well, but that was in Scotland and in London. We were also doing quite a lot of work with the University of Edinburgh, the Murray House Teacher Education Programme, and we actually have a clinician embedded within the programme who delivers lectures and support through the initial teacher education programme, but also provides support in the place or in the space of Place to Think and this kind of reflective supervision space to help students who are going through the initial teacher education program to really kind of understand, again, this behaviour as communication, mental health needs of their children and young people, their own mental health needs in terms of their capacity to respond, and generally helping them with their kind of their resilience in becoming a teacher. And we hope supporting them longer term through their career so that they've got a sense of confidence in dealing with kind of the challenges that mental health produces in their classrooms. I'm going to try this again. I think this video should work, but if it doesn't, do let me know.
Place to Think is like a space where you can go and like stop for a bit and just kind of reflect on everything.
It's not a counsellor telling you, oh, your problem's A, B, C and D and how to fix it. Is informal conversation. It's just talking to someone and it helps you become a better communicator so you can talk to other people.
Like a safe space to come to and just speak about anything that was concerning you, whether that was to do with teaching or maybe more generally about university.
It professionalises the conversations that are often happening. I think teachers do talk about what's happening in their classrooms, the things that they're finding challenging. The conversations then can be actually channelled and be much more positive.
Yeah, it was just nice to talk to sort of like a professional, someone who knew what they were talking about. Having that little bit of distance because you didn't know them, so then they didn't judge you.
Helping you work on you, but also helping you as a future teacher learn maybe how a student's going to need that in future.
So I think it's really important for teacher education that our students and ourselves actually, because we as a staff, and I certainly am learning an awful lot.
Learning more about like how I was interacting with other people, because it's all about like theory as well, which is really interesting because, you know, you're learning how and why you're working through your problems. So you're learning like the theory behind it as well.
And I do know that there have been students that have gone along that actually it really is about them, they're not seeing it as their own mental health or challenges perhaps in understanding, but about going into a classroom and just trying to be the very, very best teacher they can be.
Health and wellbeing is such an important part of the curriculum, and as part of the curriculum for excellence in any curriculum, health and wellbeing is at the centre of that.
Students are having to inhabit lots of different identities. They're a university student, they're a teacher, and so they've got these different competing expectations from their teaching colleagues in school, from their pupils, from their parents, and also they feel expectations from the university too.
Placement's probably the time where everyone kind of realises like how important everything actually is, and how you literally like, it's so busy that when like throughout the whole day you don't really get a chance to sort of collect your thoughts, and I think for some people that can definitely be really overwhelming.
With a colleague I did an evaluation, so I've researched evidence that attending Place to Think had an impact. They said it actually influenced their decision to stay on the course. While there was an element of it being a therapeutic space, it was very much focused on their teaching practice, and that really helped them moving forward in their course.
I think the Place to Think sessions definitely have increased my ability to support my students in the classroom.
We know from the research that having that, no matter what's happening in your life, if you have that secure person and secure influence, safe influence, that can make a huge impact on how you progress throughout your life and your own mental health.
We have classrooms of up to 30 children, and you might find that in some areas the majority of those sitting in front of you do have additional support needs.
You don't always necessarily want to share what you're worried about with your boss first, and your family might not understand what you're talking about. And if you're in a new school, you maybe don't know your colleagues well enough to know how much you can tell them or how much you want to tell them.
And I think the Place to Think sessions will give you the skills to be able to support yourself throughout a teaching career.
But if you don't have somewhere like Place to Be, Place to Think to talk through these issues and to remind yourself of all that, you could end up just running for the hills terrified, and then that's somebody else that's lost to the teaching profession.
I've actually really enjoyed it, and I didn't know how much I needed it until I had it.
Sorry, just so that was just some students and teachers talking about it. Sorry, and education professionals talking about the program that's in the universities in Scotland. We also do a number of kind of other programs as well that support the teaching staff around the child to understand kind of the role that mental health issues play, how they can develop their own skills, and how we can support the mental health of our children and young people in order for them to be better able to access learning. We have a number of digital tools as well, and we work with a number of partners on that as well, in order to be able to deliver those resources to children and young people digitally as well. So again, it's a whole system approach. So obviously the families are absolutely key to that. So what are we doing to support families? We have a family practitioner service, which supports the child, the family and carers around a child. And we've got a number of resources for that. So we've got the universal piece, which is our Parenting Smart app, our parenting skills courses, and parent partnership, where we work closely with a family where a child is accessing services. And then we have a targeted offer, which is personalised individual parenting training, which is an awful name. It's an awful name, and I'm sort of embarrassed that it's on that slide. So, but the program itself is really, really good. So it's working with an individual parent or carer and the child, just the two of them, in a really individualized, strengths-based way, looking at the kind of the dyadic, looking at how they are together, and then doing some work with the parent to help them support their own parenting. And that's an 8-week program. It's been developed by NHS Maudsley Adoption and Fostering Unit. It's really trauma-informed, it's really positive and strengths-based, but also because it's individual, it can be shaped to whatever the kind of cultural needs of that family are. And also it's less shaming than a lot of the work that's on the programs that are offered for parents, which tend to be group work based and can be quite shaming and quite difficult for parents to access. Parenting Smart, that's our new, well, I keep saying it's an app, but it's actually online website resources. So it's a number of kind of videos and articles and kind of a lot of information that's been put together by trained clinicians in order to provide support for parents, particularly of younger parents. It says 4 to 11 there, but actually I've looked at them. My children are a little bit older than that, but I think they're kind of useful for any age and stage, to be honest. That was a whiz through, and we're now at the any questions stage. I'm going to stop sharing in case there are any questions. I'm very happy to have a discussion with any or all of you about kind of what I've just whizzed through. There's a lot in there. Derry, go for it.
What proportion of your work do you think would be unnecessary if we had a more humane, less competitive, less threatening for teachers and for students system? And what do you think of this idea of hubs for behaviour management with processes like exclusion and isolation, which seem to me calculated to make kids sick? What would you say to that?
Okay, so I can't give you a definitive answer on that. What I can say is we absolutely are about kind of early intervention and prevention. I think there are definitely things within what we see as children reacting to are part of the system of schooling. So if we have a lot of anxiety, sorry, you've moved around on the screen there. If we have a lot of anxiety around assessment and exams, then yeah, absolutely, that's part of kind of the consequence of the system. The issues around exclusion and that type of approach, we have a bit of a different approach in Scotland. So, well, don't get me wrong, there is exclusion, it's happening, but there is a move towards not excluding children and young people and to trying to find ways of supporting those children and young people within the school setting. So we don't have pupil referral units like there are in England. We don't have that, you know, those kind of that really significant level of formalized exclusion. I'm not trying to pretend that we don't have a problem with it, but it's quite different. And I think the Scottish Government is trying to take a wellbeing approach to education as a sort of starting point.
Can I have a quick comeback?
Sure.
The girl who wrote the Scottish Young Writer of the Year piece 2 years ago slightly surprised me by her sense of alienation from schooling and the feeling of complete lack of agency and lack of autonomy in her experience of school. I've talked with groups of people in Scotland and worked a bit with University of Stirling, and I know that you are trying to find another way of doing things. But I think the evidence is that the kids in many Scottish schools feel almost as alienated and almost as lacking in agency from their school experience, even the more successful ones, who sometimes actually are the most anxious because they're anxious about losing their status as the top kids in marks, as it were. So there's still something wrong in Scotland, isn't there?
Oh God, I'm not even pretending that it's like we're not living in, it's not Elysian fields. I just think that there's maybe an approach that is a desire for it to be different, and not a desire for it to return to some kind of Victorian schooling approach.
Yeah, that's a start.
And I do think if people's intentions are good, and then I think we've got an opportunity to do things differently. And again, it's been rolled out in its own specific way, but there is now a high school counselling programme, so any child over the age of 10 can access mental health support in schools as part of that rollout of that high school programme. And Place to Be would like to see that in all schools where you've got that early intervention, prevention support. But I think you're talking about a whole-scale system change, which is a slightly different conversation to kind of what we do, but I would have sympathy with that conversation.
Thank you.
Anybody else have another question?
Sorry, I just started eating. That's why I was. No, I really try to find a time when I start eating. I was wondering that how the things changed with the COVID situation, because that's something that makes me always interested. That some people are telling me that the COVID actually made their life better because they didn't have to go to school. But of course, there are those kids who have really bad life at home, so they really needed the access to your service. So, was there any visible change or any kind of I don't know? I really so if. That I stay with it.
So I think for me, one of the most profound changes was that it was the change that you saw in staff, because they suddenly became very, very vulnerable themselves. And previously, don't get me wrong, I think there are situations where staff weren't particularly coping well, but generally speaking, you've got this kind of group of adults who are in control and safe spaces for children and young people, who all of a sudden they don't feel very safe. They're put into, they're now at the front line of delivery. They are, they individually have putting their kind of, their health at stake, their family health at stake. And that has created a lot of vulnerable adults who are theoretically supporting a lot of vulnerable children. So for me, that's one of the most the profound changes. And I think it's going to take a while for that to reset again. In terms of kind of impacts on children and young people, what we saw when schools started coming back was a lot of anxious behaviour from kids who had perfectly stable homes, but actually for some children, they'd had a lot of attention all of the time. And so they were coming back into school and kind of wanting that attention, and having to share it was really difficult. So adjusting to that was very difficult. And then there were the children for whom they hadn't had any attention or very limited attention, also desperately seeking that. So you've got a lot of very, very sort of needy behavior happening within the schools. For some people, that was just something that happened and was then momentary and passing, and could be support, you could support them through and then moved on. For others, obviously there is a kind of lasting consequence of some of this experience. So it's really different, and it's very different for different children, young people, kind of what that has been. I hope that answers your question, Kathy. David, I can see your hand up. Sorry if I've not spotted that before.
Yeah, it was. I was thinking similar to what Kata was just saying. I think there's a need to not generalize with just simply saying, mental health has improved or deteriorated, but to ask what aspects of mental health have deteriorated and which have improved, because of course it may well be a bit of both, and then to ask as well, there's what is the cause of that, because I can maybe not confirm but agree with what Kata was saying, that there is some evidence from the research that we're currently doing here to show that some aspects of mental health actually improved during the shutdown, which might go some way to support, I guess, Derry's question about whether schools are in some aspects actually detrimental to or contribute to the negative mental health or even positive mental health of students.
It would be worth looking at some of the, if you've not already, but Inquire Additional Support for Learning, the Scottish agency that support children with additional support needs. And I do know that for them, they certainly had reports of young people who were actually, not only was it better for them not to be heading into school, but actually for the first time ever, they had provision. So children who had really struggled with going into school just didn't have provision. And now that there was digital online learning, I was like, right, so great, I get to stay at home and I don't have to have this daily battle or whatever the kind of family context would be. And I actually also still continue to receive an education and a learning opportunity whilst at home. So I think there will definitely be evidence to say that. And I know there's quite a lot of research going on as well at University of Oxford as well that might be worth kind of linking into as well. And again, they're taking lots of evidence for children and young people themselves as well. And again, I'm sure there will be evidence there that supports that for some children and young people, this was actually a positive experience. Go for it, Derry.
Well, not if there's anybody else waiting, as I've had a good go. But if there isn't...
I think you go for it. Go for it.
Okay. I've been in contact with a school board in Canada which has an online elementary school and an online high school, and there are 79 other schools. You might not expect it, but it's the Ottawa Catholic School Board. Now, they've had quite a few kids in the lockdowns who've been working at home who have not rushed to come back to school as the schools reopened. And there were already a significant number of unschoolers and homeschoolers in Ontario. So what the school board has done, it's made its online, its virtual resources and all its real life physical resources available to homeschoolers, unschoolers and those who haven't come back to school to make their own demands on the system, to say this is what we'd like to learn about, this is a project we'd like to get involved in, can you support us? And the school board has said yes, which I think is a first. I haven't heard of any other example of a public school system, a publicly funded school system, offering that kind of facility and that kind of flexibility system-wide. It's not just one school that allows a bit of flexi-schooling. It's the whole system of the Ottawa Catholic School Board. Is anything like that happening in Scotland, do you know?
I'm not aware of. Your point is around access, isn't it? So I couldn't make a comment about the access. I do know that there is eSchool, which was set up to provide support to Gaelic language students, or who are being taught through the medium of Gaelic, and that provided quite that provided a platform for ongoing e-schooling or digital schooling through the pandemic, and I think it continues to. And I think that they adapted some of their resources and their work to be English medium education as well. So I don't know is my answer, but it might be worth checking out eSchool.
Thank you. Actually, on the question of the impact of COVID, you'll probably be aware of the research that shows, I think something like 30,000 kids were part of the study in England, which shows that during the lockdowns, many children read more deeply, read harder books than they would have done at school, and read for longer periods of time, uninterrupted by the bell, as it were, in school. So there certainly is some evidence of improving standards through the lockdowns. There's not enough work being done on this, I don't think, but one would hope it would rebound onto the school system and ask it to look at itself and say, are we organising our schools in the most productive, learning-centred ways? I mean, obviously, I'm an advocate for at least 20% of school curriculum time to be self-directed around the interests, passions, concerns and questions of the young people themselves. But it seems we are up against, in England, people who take quite the opposite view and say we've got to concentrate more on subjects and content, and not just in our secondary schools, but in our primary schools as well. And I think it's a wholly catastrophic proposal, personally.
I agree with you. I agree with you. We need to be looking at kind of what do children and young people want and need. There's a consultation happening at the moment being led by Ken Muir in Scotland, which is around curriculum and assessment in Scotland. So there's a consultation that's open if you wish to raise some of those issues there. I think in terms of the work that you were saying, I'm not actually familiar with the study that you're talking about, but I'd be very happy to have a look at that. I think our concern is always about, are the children and young people who are the most vulnerable receiving the support that they need, and how do we make sure that they benefit from that? You know, is there a socioeconomic dimension to that, you know, do you have the right access to that information, and how do we ensure equity of that? How do we make sure that that's that all of those young people have those opportunities?
Well, you're right, and it's terribly important. And of course, this deepening of reading, spending more time reading harder books than you read at school, all that presupposes that you have books in your house. So, I mean, I totally agree with you. But I think maybe we have to find a better way of supporting those kids than just putting them through more authoritarian schooling. But I can see my own prejudices leaking into the discussion here.
I have a question about children in the most vulnerable areas. Do you get to talk to them about what's the role of school in their lives? And I'm asking this because I'm in Brazil, and I know that during the pandemic, when we had the lockdown, the biggest concern was that many children were missing school, not because of school, but because that's where they would get food and where they would feel safe from a very violent environment. So do you take this in account? And also, do you have any comparison, like from children who are in vulnerable areas and children who are in maybe more privileged places? And another question is whether, like, talking about their feelings and how they feel and trying maybe to overcome certain traumas, do you talk also about the school organization with them, or how it would be a more welcoming place, maybe, or a place where they would feel happier to be, and try to build up from their more democratic space, educational space.
So, you know, our services in schools where the head teacher has invited us to be in the school and who is paying for the service. So, I mean, we're a charity, but obviously you have to kind of fund the staff to do the work. So that does mean that, you know, just by default, those people who choose to have us in their schools really are prioritizing the mental health needs of the children and people that they're in their school. So we tend to, you know, it tends to be the ones who are already pretty positive about that. Within our service, we have the sort of self-selection piece. So, you know, the place to talk that I mentioned during the talk. So children and young people get an option of kind of choosing the service for themselves. So there is kind of that element in there. The bigger picture about what children and young people think and need in their school spaces, I'm not the best person to talk about that, but I would kind of direct you to some of the work that children in Scotland have been doing. And I know that they've had a group of young people talking about what they want school to look like and what they want education recovery to look like. And I do also know that that group of young people includes children and young people from very different backgrounds, including rural, but also different socioeconomic backgrounds as well. So there should be something quite interesting in what they have to say. And that's, again, that's children and young people's voice. And I certainly know that there's a lot of really good charities within Scotland who are doing that piece of work. So Children in Scotland, Children's Parliament, Young Scot, Scottish Youth Parliament, these are all forums for children and young people's voice around education and what they want. And they are certainly amplifying that wherever they can. Sorry, what was your question about trauma? Sorry. Sorry, I wrote it down, but I didn't actually write the rest of it down, sorry.
No, I just, I asked you about like giving support like during the pandemic and how it was when they returned. And also this, like, it was more about like if it was taken in consideration, changing school environment, taking days, like maybe children need have different needs after the pandemic and after being through a lot of things during the pandemic, maybe I don't know the reality in Scotland, but thinking about here, we did have a lot of violence, domestic violence during the pandemic, with many people, like big families in small spaces, and children all the time at home with like no support at all from any organization or the government. So that was it.
Yeah, so I think we are seeing a lot of trauma. It's only just beginning to emerge. So even for the children who access our services or have been referred to our services, it takes a while for that sort of information to come out and to be shared, because obviously they have to have confidence in us, they have to feel comfortable. There's some work that needs to be done there so that they feel ready to share that. But we're certainly experiencing a lot of well, we would call it safeguarding issues. So we've got a lot of safeguarding issues coming up, which is as children start to disclose more and more of what's happened to them. In terms of kind of what's been put in place, there are some programs of support, and we will provide pathways to those programs. But yeah, there are clearly a lot of children and young people who had really poor experiences of lockdown who need that support now. Just reading the comment that Derry is in 2 places at once. Okie doke.
That's quite usual, actually. People are just trying to get everything they can.
Okie doke. Well, thank you very much for having me, and I hope some of it was of interest.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Lovely to meet you all.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
All right. I'll see you later. Thanks now. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.